It's showtime.
Okay, Tokyo, South America, Australia, France, Germany, UK, Africa.
Here we go. Head On with Bob Kincaid. 3 hours of conversation, cussin' and a discussin' with America's only born and bred Southern liberal talk host. Head On with Bob Kincaid is brought to you each night by Coal River Mountain Watch. Coal River Mountain Watch invites you to become part of the solution, part of a sustainable future, part of the uprising against mountaintop removal. Coal River Mountain Watch, crmw.net. And now, from high in the hills of beautiful West Bicod, Virginia, here's Bob Kincaid on the Head On Radio Network.
Well, howdy. And here we go. We're off and running for this, the 11th day of April, 2019. This is The Horn. Headon.live is where you find us on the interweb tubes. I'm informed by Jack in Shreveport that the White Rose stream is working nicely. That's pleasant news. The Headon.live stream is streaming head on. And we are rocking and rolling. Hi, I'm Bob Kincaid, and yes, it's Thorn-in-the-Side Thursday here. With my having returned from D.C., and we're back to something, well, normal's only a setting on a dryer, but still, we're back to a normal broadcast schedule. And there will be much madness to get into this evening. Thorn-in-the-Side Thursday being what Thorn-in-the-Side Thursday is. But the first thing we do on any given broadcast is to express thanks and gratitude to our subscribers who help keep the program on the air. And for this 11th day of the month, thanks go out to Christopher and to Maribel and to Sian and to Paul from Parts Unknown, to Tony and Chico, to John, and to Libby. Thank you all very kindly for being partial sponsors of the program. Remember, a $10 a month subscriber is setting him or herself back to the tune of about, not a little, maybe more than 15 cents per hour of broadcasting. Less than that if you take Dr. Bill into account. So, if you'd like to be a subscriber, jump right in. Run over to the Contribute tab at headon.live and check the little box and put in $10, and we'll be off and running. And someday we'll have 400 $10 a month subscribers, and there won't be any more of these. Though there will be nothing but thank yous every day. Okay? As it is, the fundraising goal stands at $390. And since I got wrapped up in things and didn't give it its due time, we have two challenges on the table this evening. Courtesy of Ralph's in Wisconsin. Got a Wisconsin story here in a little bit. Courtesy of Ralph's, if somebody will match $25, Ralph's will kick another $25 in for a total of $75, if I understand that correctly. And then Randy in PA has the When Billionaires Choose, You Lose challenge. And how true that is. And that's why many non-billionaires choose to check out this program between 6 and 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Monday through Friday. Thank you, Randy. And hopefully folks will jump in early on this Thorn-in-the-Side Thursday. No worries, Silent R. Lamar. We all have to deal with things from time to time. No worries whatsoever. So, also, at headon.live. If you click on chat room and pick yourself a screen name and a password. Well, you can be part of the Merry Madcap Wacky Zany real-time multimedia extravaganza that takes place in the 3 hours in which this program is live, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Monday through Friday. I just had a report from Sparky that our buddy Guy James had popped into the chat room for a minute, and I missed him somehow. Dang it. I always think of Guy when I'm in D.C. And so, well, I hope you wander back by, Guy. Right now, if you jump in, you'll be greeted immediately by a squeaky, and you will, of course, be moderated by longtime inveterate, indefatigable veteran chat room moderator Sparky, who, being a Spacing Guild master, on a day in which he was able to weed eat the North 40, well, he decided he was so excited he decided to fold space and become Man Cave. Yes. I know. Same here. Darlene in Connecticut says, I could listen to that In a Big Country drum bumper all day long. I love it. Don't ever change it. I don't think it's in any real jeopardy, considering the fact that it's been running since, 2005, something like that. But I love it, too. I really, really do. I think, and maybe our pal Joy in Ann Arbor could answer this for us. I think that's referred to as a tattoo. Is that it, or do you have to have bagpipes for one of those? I don't know. I'm not entirely certain. I know they have the great tattoo in Edinburgh every year, and I'd love to go sometime. Still on the list. But, yeah. And it is a magnificent day here in, a little kind of high, thin, scrawny clouds. But it was still a lovely day. It's 76 degrees Fahrenheit here in the fabulous Horn Studio at the magnificent Kincaid Mansion. And I can tell you that, yes, we have entered that time of year. No, there is no video rolling right now. So, that's right. Naked radio. The horror. The horror. But it's naked radio season. Probably, I was looking at the weather, and it's pathetic that I have to say these kinds of things. But remember, here at the fabulous Horn Studios at the magnificent Kincaid Mansion, we operate on coal-fried electricity. A rickety, antiquated, so 19th century, falling apart, held together with spit toilet paper and baling wire grid. And tomorrow there are thunderstorms in the forecast, beginning at about 2 p.m. and rising to about an 80-90% chance by about 5 p.m. And so it may be rocking and rolling outside by the time the program starts, if it starts. Yeah, brand new back from D.C., and I'm giving warnings about maybe no program. But that's not because I'm going to be out cavorting and doing naked non-radio in the yard or anything. No, they'd come and take me away for that. Right. Yeah. It'll be because this crappy coal-fried grid tends to go down at the drop of a hat. Just don't send any filthy-minded emails. Quit that. But yeah, the lightning scares the electricity right out of the lines. So if for some reason you tune in tomorrow, and if the power does go out, I will do everything. I'll get a tweet out. If at all humanly possible, and with any luck at all, well, we'll stay on the air. But anytime I see that thunderbolt icon in the forecast, I realize that it could significantly interfere with the broadcast. That's right. Darlene pointing out that In a Big Country, the band, used guitar synthesizers to mimic those bagpipes. They did. That was a guitar synth. Guitar synth was a big thing along about 1983. One of the pioneers of guitar synth, if I understand correctly, was at the time Pat Metheny, and one of my favorite manifestations of it is an album from 83, 84, Pat Metheny group. It's called First Circle. It's got a lot of Brazilian influence to it. And in fact, I was listening. It was one of those songs that Apple Music just randomly chose for me as I drove home yesterday under those magnificent high blue skies down through the Blue Ridge Valley, between the Blue Ridge to the east and the Allegheny Front to the west. And if you've never heard Pat Metheny's The First Circle, by all means, check it out. It's wonderful, and it's just got oodles of guitar synth in it. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to grab my water. Stand by. All better now. That was only a little bit of dead air. That was a little bit more because I didn't want you to have to hear me popping the top on the can. Ooh. Who put the water in my water? Yeah. What's that, Scott? Coal-fired grid. Here's something I saw on the Facebook feed this morning from Existential Comics. Here are a few small things that everyone can do to help the environment. Turn off the lights when you leave a room. Use a reusable water bottle. Take the bus instead of driving. Guillotine the rich. Recycle. Yeah. That's true. Sparky pointing out, lightning always wins with a power line or a transformer, Bob. That's as true as far as it goes, but when the power lines and the transformers are as poorly maintained as our coal-fried power company maintains theirs, it makes matters significantly worse. Well, I've gotten on Brother Deacon Ace's bad side already. Naked Radio. You have us reaching for that bottle of mellow corn far too early in the program, Bob. Have some mercy. Oh, man. Brother Deacon Asa took one for the team and bought a plastic fifth of mellow corn whiskey. He sent me a picture. The mere photograph was enough to make my liver quiver. And he did report that it was a self-inflicted wound, and it was every bit as awful as he expected it to be, and perhaps more so. Mellow corn whiskey. I don't think even ginger ale or 7-Up or Coke could help with that. No. Not at all. But it's Thorn-in-the-Side Thursday, a day we reserve for those moments with the right wing that feel like just right between the ribs. And I have some top-notch examples thereof. Oh, wait a minute. This, courtesy of Billable Rick. Stop telling us what dirty emails not to send you, Bob. Nice to see we're off and running early in the program this evening. It was a big, it was supposed to be a big day today in Israel. After all, the psychopath, Benjamin Netanyahu, was narrowly reelected with a lot of probably less than less than legal help. Oh, wait, it's a special day, says Ron in Raleigh. I'm sure you and the rest of the Horn family are all together in wishing Flotus a very happy birthday. She looks good for 119 years old. I guess bathing in the blood of virgins is a wonderful preservative. Yes, and then you can lick the bowl, blah. Wait, what's that? Pat Metheny? Yeah, Billable Rick says he's still playing and has a lot of younger guys in his band as a means of transmitting his musical style and skills. That's cool. I saw him once, eons ago. I'd love to see him again sometime. There are a couple of pieces that he did that just absolutely enchant me. One of them is Farmer's Trust. Just a note here and a note there, and so minimalist and yet breathtakingly beautiful. Farmer's Trust is kind of a song for twilight. But no, it was supposed to be a big day in Israel today. They were going to land an unmanned lunar spacecraft on the moon. It was they were hoping to join a club of only 4, the U.S., Russia, and China, in having soft landed an object on the moon. Well, a little, and just a little bit before touchdown, it took a selfie and sent it home, and then it corkscrewed into the lunar surface. Let's see, the press release from the outfit said, "We had a failure of the spacecraft. We have not landed successfully," explained a spokesman from a deflated mission control in Yehud, Israel. A problem with the spacecraft's engine was reported at 3:24 p.m. Eastern Time, and communication with Bereshit was lost. And it was an ambitious name for the craft, Bereshit. I guess in Hebrew it means in the beginning, which is the opening line of the book of Genesis, which is a little bit disingenuous considering the number of things that have landed there before Bereshit, so it wasn't exactly a beginning. It would have been more aptly named, and along came a lot later. But it was not to be, and so it was about the size of, it was reported to have been about the size of a washing machine, and slammed into the lunar surface in a way that it was not designed so to do. Not much loss to science. Among the things it was carrying was a copy of the Israeli Declaration of Independence and a copy of the first 5 books of the Bible. Because that's what interstellar space really needs, is some Bible. My God, if the aliens ever... Oh, dear God, dear God, dear God. What? Hey, yeah, come here. Get over here. Use all of your amorphous limbs. Run. You're not going to believe this shit. We just found this thing on the satellite of that blue planet over there, and it's got a story in it that celebrates a guy fucking his daughters. Yeah. Maybe we ought to leave this place alone. I don't know. Maybe we ought to vaporize it. Jack in Shreveport points out, that thing was awfully damn sciencey to put all that religion in its payload. Yeah, I know. But, I guess you kind of have to when you come from a theocracy. One of those countries that has buses that only men can ride on. Then again, I didn't understand why they wanted to put that thing on the moon anyway. Did they want to claim? Did they want to claim the moon as belonging to part of the patrimony of Jacob? Or I don't know. But as far as I know, there aren't any Palestinians on the moon to shit on. So why go? Okay, I'll check that out. Hung Like Jesus says, hey, Bob, I got a band for you. If you like that 70s sound of Ambrosia, Pablo Cruz, etc., a.k.a. California rock, check out Young Gun Silver Fox. Oh, with a name like that, how can I not? So I will. Irish Dave, you mean it's surprise attack the moon with Torah, 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 Torah? Yeah, that's with an H there, Dave. Right. But that's just a start. And I'm sure they'll make a second attempt. They were going to land on the west bank of the Mare Serenitatis, and I'm sure that's not the kind of thing that they're just going to let slide. You know, they describe Gaza as the world's largest open-air concentration camp. Maybe the air is getting... y'all Palestinians, if they offer you free transportation to a place where don't, just say no. Just say no. But this is, there's lots of stupid, right-wing stupid out there today. But this one, Agnes sent this one along, and this was in an early lead for way far up the Thorn-in-the-Side Thursday list. Remember when Emmanuel Macron and his lovely spouse came to visit the new 90 states of Merca last year? About this time last year, as a matter of fact. Well, when they came to visit, Monsieur and Madame Macron joined Julius Geezer and Melanoma for a little jaunt across the Potomac to a shanty that once belonged titularly to George Washington. Wait, we'll come back to that in a minute. Why, you ask, says Ron in Raleigh? Bibi Netanyahu was going to annex that sumbitch, meaning the moon. That was my thinking. But it was April the 23rd, 2018, when Mr. and Mrs. Geezer and Mr. and Mrs. Macron visited Mount Vernon. Remember, George Washington never had any young'uns, and he married money. He married an older widow lady by the name of Martha Custis. I tell you what, I had a feeling the Israeli moonshot story would generate be a joke generator, and I was right. Scott in San Diego, subject line: Israel's washing machine on the moon. One of these days, Alice, pow, zoom to the moon. Maybe it was to keep Alice crammed and give her something to do on the lunar surface, the washing machine on the moon. Yeah, that gets a jingle, Scott. Mm-hmm. But back to Mount Vernon. You know, and it persists to this day, but it was a really big deal back in the 18th century to name your estate. Now, up in New England, did they do that shit? Did John Adams have a name for his farm there, somewhere near Boston? Well, George Washington's mansion was named Mount Vernon, because you need an ostentatious name if you're going to have a mansion there that's operated by people from whom you were stealing their labor. Which he did. And Washington, in his own life, while later revered for his leadership of the Constitutional Convention and his the first 2 terms as President of the United States. He was not noted as being the best general in the world and was said to be right stuffy, as a matter of fact, and really liked it when people called him Your Excellency, and enjoyed pomp and circumstance and wanted to be bowed to and deferred to, and had a little, and although he did reject the idea of being king, he rather liked the trappings of one. And when he died at a relatively young age, because he had been medically malpracticed upon, I think we're going to have to bleed some more of those demons and ill humors out of him. Might be a little bit more black bile in there. And the next thing you know, George is paler and whiter than he's ever been, and then he gets all dead. Irish Dave points out, when George married the land-rich widow, he may have become the richest man in all the 13 colonies. And then he worked virtually free, though he padded his expense account bigly. I once, as an early teen, I read George Washington's expense account. It was a piece of work. Creative accounting, to say the least. He said he would not accept payment for his services as General of the Army, Continental Army, but he would like his expenses paid, and then turned in the damnedest expense report you've ever seen. But when Julius and Melanoma went to visit, they were led on their tour by a guy named Doug Bradburn. He's the CEO and president of Mount Vernon. And he later said that he struggled, Bradburn did, was desperately trying to get Trump interested in Mount Vernon, because this most incurious of presidents wasn't interested. Among other things, he wondered aloud to his tour guide and asked him, why didn't he name Mount Vernon after himself? And then, because he's so damn, well, he's got such a bigly brain, it's a very good brain, and he has all the best words, he said that, what you've really got to do, if he was smart, he would have put his name on it. You got to put your name on stuff, or no one remembers you. Never mind that whole defeated the British, led the Constitutional Convention. He didn't put his name on the building, so nobody remembers who George Washington was. It was made of wood and probably lead paint. And if only he'd gotten a whole bunch of candles every night and had the staff, the workers, to light those candles spelling Washington across it. Well, but then the house would have burnt down. But, we're dealing with the mind of Donald Trump here now, aren't we? And it went on at length. Mr. Bradburn responded to the, why didn't he name the house after himself, by saying, well, he did manage to get the nation's capital named after him. The White House has not immediately responded by a request for comment on this story. But moreover, he had no interest in history whatsoever. And President and Madame Macron actually knew more about the American Revolution than Trump did. And that's explainable, because there would be no American Revolution. It would just be an American insurrection that was promptly put down, were it not for a French fleet that anchored off of the Yorktown Peninsula, effectively trapping the British troops there at Yorktown and made it impossible for them to fight their way out, and thus, setting the scene for the surrender of Lord Cornwallis. Yeah, I know. I'm having trouble myself. Steve in New York asking, now who was George Washington again? Right. That's true. That's true. It does. It happens all the way up until this illustrious day. Ron and Raleigh asking, didn't Rick Goodhair Perry give his family estate in Texas an ostentatious name? Well, it may not have been Rick. It was probably further back in the family, but yes, it had to do with a sort of head with a word in front of that, yeah, let's not. At one point in time, though, although Trump had no interest in the history of this nation's founding, he did ask, was George Washington really rich? Yeah, dumbass, he was really rich. You're living on land that he sold to the young federal government at a vastly inflated price. Kind of like you did with that mansion you sold to the Russian oligarch down in Florida. Only it wasn't quite as over the top and obviously corrupt as, what you did there, Chlamydia Claudius. But finally, they showed him the bed where Washington died in 1799. And there the Tangerine Tiberius remarked, it's a good bed to die in. It's a good bed to die in. Oh, our poor country. But then again, let's remember that while he is he's more stupid even than dim leader, raisin brain, Bush, son of Bush, he probably has an operating understanding of American history that is not too far off from the average American. Yeah, what's that? Yes, to erase all doubt. The name of the Rick Perry family ranch. Steve in New York says, let's call it Gingerhead. Yes, there we go. Scott in San Diego, the naming of Mount Vernon. Here's what Wikipedia says about it. When George Washington's ancestors acquired the estate, it was known as Little Hunting Creek Plantation, after the nearby Little Hunting Creek. However, when Washington's older half-brother, Lawrence Washington, inherited it, he changed its name to Mount Vernon in honor of Vice Admiral Edward Vernon, famed for the War of Jenkins' Ear and capture of the Portobello Colon. Vernon had been Lawrence's commanding officer in the British Royal Navy. When George Washington inherited the property, he retained the name. A little further down the old Potomac, over on the Maryland side, is Fort Washington. Somehow I don't think, Scott says, there will be any forts or other military installations named for Trump. Well, maybe a latrine. I have a feeling you will be sorely disappointed, Scott, because after Trump has gone to his long home, we'll probably name a fucking aircraft carrier after him. After all, we named one after Pappy Bush, and we named one after Gerald fucking Ford, and we named one after that greasy-headed old B-movie actor, old 666 himself, Ronald Wilson Reagan. Megan, meanwhile, says, Julius Geezer's spirit animal. Every time I hear this kind of story about 45, the only fact I can remember is that an ostrich's eye is bigger than its brain. Donald Ostrich Trump. Donald Ostrich Brain Trump. Yeah, there's not a lot of heavy lifting going on in that ostrich brain, I don't think. No. So, why didn't he name it after himself? And that's an interesting story. especially in conjunction with the following. There was an op-ed in USA Today yesterday by John Gardner. And John Gardner is a practicing mental health professional. He wrote, "If Donald Trump were your father, you would run, not walk, to a neurologist for an evaluation of his cognitive health. You don't have to be a doctor to see something is very wrong." Quote, "He reminds me of Uncle Bruce in so many ways," said my aunt, who nursed her brother through Alzheimer's disease. Joe Scarborough, who has known Trump for years, said in 2017 that Trump's mental confusion reminded him of his mother, who had Alzheimer's for 10 years. "It's getting worse, and not a single person who works for him doesn't know he has early signs of dementia," he said of Trump last year on his MSNBC show. "To mental health professionals like me, the red flags are waving wildly. In January 2018, over 70 of us wrote a letter to the president's physician, Dr. Ronnie Jackson, urging him to administer a cognitive exam during the president's physical because we had seen a marked deterioration in his verbal functioning, possibly due to cognitive decline." In fact, Dr. Jackson did administer the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, a screening tool for dementia, and Trump passed. But while Trump bragged that this proved his superior intelligence, this 10-minute screening test, where one must identify a camel, draw a clock, and repeat 3 numbers backwards, only ruled out full-blown dementia. We argued in a subsequent op-ed that these findings did not rule out the early stages of dementia. We also predicted that if this was organic cognitive decline, it would continue to get worse, and since that op-ed more than a year ago, it has gotten worse. Memory loss is the symptom most closely associated with Alzheimer's. While Trump famously forgets the names of people, as he did recently when he called Apple CEO Tim Cook Tim Apple, and places, as when he called Paradise, California, pleasure, one could make allowances for such gaffes. More troubling, Michael Wolff reported in Fire and Fury that at the end of 2017, Trump failed to recognize a succession of old friends at Mar-a-Lago. Trump, 72, seemed to hit a new inflection point last week when he said, "My father is German, right, was German, and born in a very wonderful place in Germany." In fact, his father was born in the Bronx, and it was his grandfather who was from Germany, and I will add editorially, and was thrown out of Germany for being a coward, and came back and went back to his previous trade as a pimp. Dementia Care International says a person may start to mix up relationships and generations in the second stage of dementia. One day, when my Uncle Bruce was agitated, he cried out for me saying, "Call John, he's a rich lawyer, he'll know what to do," even though it was my father who was the lawyer, not me. That was not in the early phase of the illness. That incident took place a few months before Uncle Bruce was forced to enter the nursing home. This is 25th Amendment stuff. In Alzheimer's, as language skills deteriorate, we see 2 types of telltale speech disorders, or paraphasias. Semantic paraphasia involves choosing the incorrect words. For instance, after Attorney General William Barr released a letter on the Mueller report, Trump said, "I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of that investigation, the beginnings of that investigation." Phonemic paraphasia, which is linked to the moderate to severe stages of Alzheimer's, is described as the substitution of a word with a non-word that preserves at least half of the segments and or number of syllables of the intended word. For example, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu becomes Betanyahu, Big League becomes Bigly, anonymous becomes anonymous or anonymous, renovation becomes renoversh, missiles become mishes, space capsule becomes capsicle, midterm elections become midtown, and midterm elections, and Christmas becomes Christmas. Trump's speech patterns appear even more disordered when you go beyond the soundbite and look at a whole speech. He careens from one thought to the next in a parade of non sequiturs, frequently interrupting himself in the middle of a sentence to veer into another free association. When commentators described his 2-hour speech at the Conservative Political Action Conference last month as unhinged, they were referring largely to this quality. That's by John Gardner, a psychologist, a former assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. And he ain't kidding. And there's a reason to worry about all this, of course. Because this guy has access to the nuclear weapons arsenal of the United States. And apparently also considers himself above the law, to the extent he is able to consider anything whatsoever. He can also start conventional wars. You may recall that the Congress passed a resolution in both houses disapproving of his ongoing support for the filthy, bloody Saudi war against people in Yemen, which at present is the most desperate and pathetic place on planet Earth. Doesn't matter. Oh, going back to a did you know moment from Ron and Raleigh. There's a large outcropping of rock in Wise, Virginia that has the same name Rick Perry's as Rick Perry's family estate. People are very creative with their namings. I'd be surprised in Wise. Is it Wise County, Virginia, Ron? Because if it is, there's a good chance that it ain't there anymore. Because thanks to mountaintop removal, something around a third of Wise County, Virginia, no longer exists. I've seen it with my own eyes. Yeah. This idea, and it's flustering, and again, it wasn't invented by the Trump regime. Oh, who was it that got held in contempt of Congress in the Bush regime, and they just went ho-hum? But they're looking at holding Steve Mnuchin in contempt of Congress. They're also, there's been another. Well, let's see. Bill Pascrell, a member of the House, is suggesting that Mnuchin could be held in contempt for his having interfered and finagled in the legal, lawful congressional request for Trump's tax returns. Pascrell went on to, because that request for the tax returns was not sent to the Department, to the Secretary of the Treasury. It was sent to the IRS Commissioner, Chuck Rettig. And Chuck Rettig, Pascrell suggested, should possibly step down. Interviewed, Pascrell said, I want to take a look at contempt of Congress here because the way Mnuchin talked and the way he writes, he's very dismissive of the legislative branch of government, particularly if that part of the legislative branch of government is controlled by the Democratic Party. But you must remember that this regime in the White House takes a fascist approach to governance. Threatened with contempt, they might well respond, how many divisions does the House of Representatives control? And then there's the House Oversight Committee, led by Representative Elijah Cummings of Maryland. And they are threatening to hold John Gore, Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General, in contempt of Congress. This has to do with the 2020 citizenship question. And in point of fact, they issued a subpoena for John Gore, and John Gore has said, fuck off. Yeah. And they want to ask him about Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross's decision to add a citizenship question to the census, because when you do that, you cut down on the number of people actually considered by the census, and thereby take a big step toward crippling the government's ability to do the business of the people. Elijah Cummings wrote, "The committee expects Mr. Gore to testify in accordance with the committee's lawful subpoena and the committee's rules. If Mr. Gore fails to comply with the subpoena, the committee will consider him to be in contempt of Congress." He was supposed to testify today. He blew it off. Now, Congress does have contempt powers, and they do have a power of arrest, and there is a jail in the Capitol. But we seem to have this ongoing fetish for pretending that that we're still in a normal place. We aren't. And going back to what I said about Trump's ongoing mental decline in conjunction with his access to the launch codes, well, something to consider. The only remedy to Trump doing something stupid, something murderous, something insane, something psychotic, something demented, like ordering a nuclear strike. And I know a lot of people have pinned a lot of hopes on this, is that the military would recognize his actions as being well and truly nuts, and therefore refuse to follow the order. I'm not nearly as sanguine as many people are in that regard. And the fact of the matter is, in such an instance, it would, in effect, constitute a military coup. And a military coup would, and should it happen, will be the end of us. Because military coups are rather like Lay's potato chips. You can't have just one. Once that bottle's been uncorked, there's no evidence of the genie going back in and staying, because it doesn't happen. And it really would be the end of the United States of America. Of course, so too would a full-scale nuclear war. So it feels like there's really no good way out. Regarding Trump's memory, Scott in San Diego offers this up. Trump today, after being asked about Julian Assange's arrest, I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. Then there's Trump at an October 2016 rally in Pennsylvania. I love WikiLeaks. Scott says, I can't get my head around what, if any, implications that will arise from Assange's arrest. Will he be extradited? His lawyer signals a huge and long fight ahead. If he's sent here, will further charges be made against him? Yeah, I nominate the WikiLeaks campaign emails part. If there's a trial, will the outcome be along the lines of the Chicago 8, then 7 trial? Political theater with convictions later being overturned? Or, and anything's possible these days, Assange won't make it to trial as he'll be terminally shanked while under pretrial confinement. Or, hey, wait, you left one out, Scott. He gets pardoned by the President of the United States. How about that one? Yeah. WikiLeaks. Yeah, let's go there. I know that there are over there among the people who, well, never mind who they are. There are people who think that somehow Julian Assange is getting a raw deal. I don't. First of all, the charge the United States has unsealed against him, which was hinted at as far back as November when there was an accidental listing on a court docket there in the Northern District of Virginia. Well, it's one count of conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. In other words, conspiracy to hack. And it goes back to when Assange, at the head of WikiLeaks, agreed to help the person now known as Chelsea Manning, who went up the river for far too long, basically because of Julian Assange. And Julian Assange was more than happy to see her go. Well, he promised to help her. He was a he then. He promised to help her figure out a password to get into a database. And among other things, the record is fairly clear that when Chelsea said, you know, after this next dump, I got nothing else, Assange continued to try to wring more out of her. It's pathetic. But the charge for which extradition will be sought is not espionage. It isn't spying. It is something that is rather routinely understood to be illegal. I don't think there's anybody within the sound of my voice who would say that someone has not committed a crime if they conspired, say, to steal your personal data and then went about the business of trying to weaponize that data, or maybe used your credit card information to buy gas in Verdun, France. I mean, that happened to me once. And I think we all agree that that's a crime. Well, if that's a crime, then so is what Julian Assange did. And Julian Assange is no hero. And I say this in full confidence because unlike a whole lot of other people way, way back when I read an interview with him when they asked him about his politics, and he said, well, I consider myself more of a libertarian, so I suppose I would align myself more closely with the Republican Party in the United States of America. I knew he was a rat fucker right then, right there. And he has never to this day proven me wrong. So there will be no crocodile tears from me for Julian Assange. And then, of course, there's the business that WikiLeaks worked actively, and the Mueller investigation did at least, before Mueller took a dive, did at least uncover the participation, the conspiracy between a bunch of state actors over in Mother Russia. The same Mother Russia that wrote checks to Jill Stein and who's the crook? The first see that you lose them after a while. The first national security advisor for Trump pled guilty, But the conspiracy between them and WikiLeaks to release all those hacked Democratic emails, and yet at the same time, even though they hacked the RNC, we have yet to see so much as a single forwarded email from a Nigerian princess seeking to recover the funds from her cancer-stricken husband's estate. Not a sausage. Nonetheless, even though he said, I have no idea what WikiLeaks even is, I know nothing about WikiLeaks, it's not my thing. Jesus, this is straight out of Austin Powers. No, really. It's not my thing. You remember, right? Let's see. I think. Yeah.
Actually, my name is Austin Powers.
It says here, name Danger Powers.
No. Danger's my middle name.
Okay, Austin Danger Powers. One blue crushed velvet suit.
Hey, all right.
One frilly lace cravat.
There it is.
One silver medallion with male symbol. One pair of Italian boots.
Buongiorno, boys.
One vinyl record album, Burt Bacharach plays his hits.
Hey, bro. Yeah.
One Swedish-made penis enlarger pump.
That's not mine.
One credit card receipt for Swedish-made penis enlarger, signed by Austin Powers.
I'm telling you, baby, that's not mine.
One warranty card for Swedish-made penis enlarger pump, filled out by Austin Powers.
I don't even know what this is. This sort of thing ain't my bag, baby.
One book, Swedish-made penis enlarger pumps and me. This sort of thing is my bag, baby.
It's not my thing. I don't know anything about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. One archive of tweets saying, WikiLeaks, it's my thing, baby. Right. Yeah, Michael Flynn. Thank you, Steve in New York. Michael Flynn. Yes. Mm-hmm. So, pardon me if that rings just the tiniest bit hollow, because among other things, Christina Wilkie tweeted today, he was such a fan back in 2016 that he had a Julian Assange poster in the debate war room, and it was captioned, Dear Hillary, I miss reading your classified emails. Oh, really? Yeah. And then there were the 41 times he said WikiLeaks. I'm sorry, 141 different times that he said WikiLeaks on the
All right,
campaign
I want to take
trail.
you back to the 2016 campaign that we were just
Ali
talking about.
Velshi,
Donald Trump
MSNBC.
referenced WikiLeaks some 141 times just in his final month of campaigning. Here's every one of them.
WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks. 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 That came out on WikiLeaks. 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 Boy, I love reading those WikiLeaks. 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 WikiLeaks, right? It's WikiLeaks. 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 That's WikiLeaks. Did you see on WikiLeaks? On WikiLeaks. 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 And WikiLeaks. 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 So it came out through WikiLeaks. 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 WikiLeaks is fascinating. The WikiLeaks revelations. WikiLeaks. 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 Wiki. WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks shows how crooked the whole thing is. WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is unbelievable. You see all of these WikiLeaks. 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 WikiLeaks, 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 WikiLeaks. Now from WikiLeaks. Did you see what came out over WikiLeaks? WikiLeaks, 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 WikiLeaks. Now from WikiLeaks. Oh, we love WikiLeaks. 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 We've learned so much from WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks, 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 WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks just came out with lots of really unbelievable things. WikiLeaks. 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 Again. Nobody's covering WikiLeaks. 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 Released by WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks. The WikiLeaks documents. WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks just came out today. WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks emails. WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks, right? WikiLeaks. 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 The WikiLeaks. 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 This WikiLeaks stuff is unbelievable. WikiLeaks. 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 I love WikiLeaks. We have to go back to WikiLeaks. Oh, WikiLeaks. 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 All you have to do is take a look at WikiLeaks.
Never heard of him. Yeah. Except for the 100. And the fact that he's got like a teenage girl crush poster in his campaign room. Yeah. Hi. Hey, thanks very kindly to Charlene in Rhode Island. Thank you very kindly indeed. Charlene got us started on fundraising a little bit ago. Now that we're at the top of the hour, I'll remind folks we've got a challenge courtesy of Ralph's in Wisconsin, and the When Billionaires Choose, You Lose challenge courtesy of Randy in PA. And Charlene in Rhode Island, a charter member of the sorority of Leans, did in fact get us started. So that meets Ralph's challenge. And now, for the remaining hour and 57 minutes of the program, we'll go to work on Randy's When Billionaires Choose, You Lose challenge. So hopefully and the funding and the goal is $390, so that would be two, and that would let's see, that's 200 and 275. That would leave $115 to go to finish the evening. So thank you, Charlene, and please let's knock down this this $100 challenge, because it was mighty nice of Randy and PA to make it. So thanks again, very, very kindly. What's this? Lee in New York says, WikiLeaks, he says words so poorly that I'm hearing golf in President Mulligan's words. I keep hearing WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks. And yes, you did. Jack in Shreveport asks, did I hear him throw a WinkyLeaks in there? Yes, you did. Of course you did. We go back to the psychologist's note from earlier. Oh, and Ron in Raleigh lets us know, hey, Bob, et cetera, et cetera. I can see bare ground in about 10% of my backyard. Can muddy season be far behind? By the way, every time I now hear WikiLeaks, I think about going to the head. And I suspect I'm just a week away from returning to the sandbox, just 2 weeks after getting back from the last trip, and only 24 hours notice. Whee! Well, if I have to miss the smoked ham Easter dinner, it's only fitting that I do it in the Middle East. Well, I can see where there's a certain logic to that. No doubt, no doubt. Safe travels, Ron, safe travels. We're still hoping for a new shipment of Old Weller Antique 107 around here. Yeah. Not that I can pound it away or anything, but it's nice to have it on hand. I don't know what crashed, Arnold. He said it crashed. Thanks, China. Stream seems to be going, and of course that's where my thoughts always go. Well, hey, let's run over and check in with John in Central PA. Shall we? Let's. Hey, John. No, John gone. Okay, let's try the... Let's try the stress line then. Just a second. We'll get connected here. And I did find out while I was on the road, no, there's nothing malicious that's making the Bluetooth drop here in the studio. It is, it's the Gizmo box. Because the new Gizmo held a Bluetooth signal without a problem. So, yeah. Anyway, let's run over and check in on the stress line. Hey, welcome to the program.
Hi, it's Darlene.
Hey, Darlene, how are you? Yeah, I got you.
Oh, good. Okay, because I've been sitting on the phone for a while, and then it just went dead. Your voice disappeared. So I called back in, and I'm like, oh.
I'm glad you did. I was coming that way, and the same. I mean, it happened on this. The Bluetooth dropped.
Oh, okay.
And so the little and you know, from the gathering of empirical data standpoint, the Gizmo that I took with me to D.C. had no problem keeping a Bluetooth connection. This one does.
Oh, so you're 50-50.
Yeah.
So there's so much going on, I can't help but call in. Even though I'm I'm a last-minute tax filer, so I'm pulling my hair out.
Yeah, the sweats.
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't anything that I intended. I got slammed with a federal grant by one of something I haven't written. Writing federal grants are not in my bailiwick, but I wanted to do one, but this year, but not like this, where you need at least 6 weeks to write one, and they told me 3 weeks before the deadline. So of course, all the weekends and everything that I was going to devote to my taxes went to writing the federal grant. So
ouch.
now I'm, So, but I can't help myself. I had to call in because there's so much going on, and I had no idea that it was Melanola's birthday today. But I think Great Britain and the Ecuadorian embassy, they got her beat because I didn't even hear about her, and I feel like it was well worth, 7 years that he was imprisoned, that he imprisoned himself in the Ecuadorian embassy.
Yeah, and that photo, Darlene, that photo. I mean, the David Letterman beard, David Letterman can do what David Letterman wants, and this is very shallow since we're talking about appearances, but Julian Assange's attempt at the David Letterman beard was, as the kids say, a fail.
Yeah, I just simply couldn't. I just couldn't wait to. I just love seeing his ugly ass getting hauled out of that embassy today, or is it yesterday now because it's across the pond time? Maybe it was yesterday. What is it? A 6 or 12 hour?
Yeah, no,
time?
I think it's yesterday now because it's about 1:09 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time.
Right, and I am completely, and of course you know me, I never liked him because even though they dropped the sexual assault and rape charges over in, I guess, in Sweden. He is a disrespectful son of a bitch, and I can totally see him taking advantage of everybody and everything. So finally, I guess Ecuador got sick of him, although I guess they got a new leader there, a new president who had enough of him. But it's going to take forever for him to get extradited to the U.S., although I do agree it seems like the United States carefully crafted their charges against him so that they could kind of steer clear of the whole journalism thing, that he's somehow a journalist. But I agree, I don't think he cares about this country whatsoever. He hates us. And I would like to know if he's in possession of, I don't know if it was confirmed or not.
Right, and Julian Assange is a journalist the way I'm a nuclear physicist.
There you go.
Not
exactly.
at all.
Not at all. Exactly. And I mean, in the Mueller indictment of the 12 Russian military personnel, I think he devoted maybe a half a sentence or possibly a full sentence, maybe two, to the whole thing about the RNC, hacking of the RNC emails and the conservative think tank emails. I sure as all hell would love to know if Julian Assange is in possession of those, or WikiLeaks is in possession of those emails. Because if they are, if he is, then the fact that he released one and not the other just goes to show how biased he is, and that he was looking to take down only one, political campaign and one party in the
right.
country.
I mean, I'm not wrong. I mean, I remember in the initial reporting that the RNC and the DNC were both hacked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But only the DNC gets released.
Exactly. And no one has asked. I don't think anyone in Congress has yet asked. I don't think they asked Barr. I hope somebody has a presence of mind to ask Robert Mueller that when they finally, when he has to get up in front of them and testify. I'd be very, very curious. I think there needs to be kind of a drumbeat about that. Where are those emails? Is anyone compromised on the Republican side? Because, whether it's probably Russia is in possession of these emails, why did that just kind of go down the memory hole?
Exactly.
So I mean that's one thing. The other thing was the Barr testimony, which and it just shows you how naive I am, because when he was talking about when he was in front of the Senate, and the lady who was there, who I guess was chairing it, sitting next to Patrick Leahy, when he brought up spying, I actually thought that he meant spying as in Russia spying on the United States and the United States spying on Russia. I didn't understand, because the term spied or spying is such a loaded term. I did not know or realize until I was watching, CNN and MSNBC that night, that he actually meant our intelligence community spying on the Trump campaign.
Yes.
And I was stunned.
That's flabbergasting.
It is flabbergasting. I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And
that's another case, but it's another case of speaking to an audience of one. Don't you agree?
Oh yes, absolutely. But also he's such a bullfrog. He revealed that he already has a predetermined notion about it, because he came right out and said, "Oh, I think there was spying, but I want to look into it." But he's already saying he already thinks there was something there. So I don't know if anyone.
Well, the thing is,
him on that.
It's the word spying is carrying a lot of freight.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
absolutely
there was surveillance, and the surveillance was of Carter Page's interactions through a third party with the Russians. And these things are legal to do.
Precisely.
Because, I mean, as liberal as I am, I do acknowledge that you don't just sit there and let people surveil you and potentially do harm. And so they were surveilling Carter Page, and as a result of that, there's other stuff that kept dribbling back into the information stream that looked creepy as hell. And it looked creepy as hell about Donald Trump. And what do you do if you're the FBI, Darlene? And the next thing you know, the Republicans are having a convention, and the first senator to sign on the Trump train is having tete-a-tetes with the Russian foreign minister.
Yeah. And,
I mean, do you just say ho-hum? I mean, because the Democrats will be doing that too?
Right. Yeah, no, I exactly. The FBI, well, of course, he went to great lengths or great pains to say he's not necessarily talking about the FBI. But what this son of a bitch does is he tries to eat and have his, what is it, the saying, have his cake and eat it too? Because his testimony is contradictory left and right. When he was talking about his 4-page, well, it wasn't even 4-page distillation of Robert Mueller's 400-page plus report.
Yeah, and it's a distillation the way wood alcohol is a distillation. Pure poison.
Pure poison, exactly. And he's like, well, one of the, I don't know if it was a senator or a representative, but
oh, hold on. I'm kind of proud of that, Darlene. Pure poison and unfit for consumption.
Exactly. But he's like, well, he asked Robert Mueller to review the letter, and Robert Mueller didn't bite. Basically, he said he declined. And then I don't know if the representative had said to him, well, what about having him help you write the letter? He goes, well, it's my letter. And it's like, well, you can't have it both ways. If it's your letter and you wrote it, why did you ask him to review it? Because I think what he was hoping is that he could goad Robert Mueller into saying, okay, maybe signing off on it, so he could use that and say, well, the special counsel looked my memo over and it was fine. He said he had no issue with it.
Yeah,
Again,
it was a very clumsy attempted setup.
It was right, exactly, and Mueller saw right through it and declined. So, you got to expect that if this is what he's doing in front of Congress, this is what he's doing with people he works with, including Mueller and I just see somebody who auditioned for that role and has enormous power and is now trying to say, well, he's not necessarily talking about the FBI, who clearly there's plenty of evidence, certainly in the public view, that the FBI was absolutely freaked out over what was going on with Trump and the firing of Comey and all of these. They did what they needed to do, and I think it came from a place of caring about this country vis-a-vis a hostile foreign power. So I wouldn't put it past him to be looking at the FBI or even though he said, well, it's not necessarily the case, he also kind of dragged Christopher Wray into it too, saying, oh, he's a good match with me or something like that, and looking forward to having him help him in this so-called, spying investigation. And I'm very troubled by that term. And the only really ultimately the only one who's laughing his ass off and benefiting from all of this is, guess who?
Right.
Besides Trump, Vladimir Putin.
Sure.
He's having a field day with this. So, I found that I am troubled by the fact that this William Barr swooped in at the last minute, and now basically took control of our ability to see this report. Now he's going to color code it. He's crazy. He's crazy. He's going to color code his actions.
Yeah, we're one more back step away from circles and arrows with color glossy photos with circles and arrows and a paragraph on the back of each one.
Yeah, and
I mean,
don't know if
we're reaching Alice's Restaurant levels of absurdity.
Exactly, and I don't know if I didn't hear anyone question him on this, but like just come out and ask him: Is this your working style? Is this how you work? Because considering how overwhelmed I've been with my work, I look at in the last few weeks. Basically, what I try to do is I try to dispense with the tasks that are like the easiest and quickest to dispense with. That it's efficient, quick, boom, get them out of the way.
Yeah, it's like sitting through a complicated standardized test. They tell you when time is of the essence, you go through, you answer the ones that are easy first, the I know it for sure's, and then you come back and you cogitate.
Correct.
So yeah, do the stuff you absolutely know first, then come back. But with the Mueller report, and Darlene, I resist speculating about it simply because I'm frustrated with so much of the speculation. But if it's 400 pages, it's the Department of Justice. You've got 40 lawyers with security clearances. Each one gets 10 pages.
Well, I would take it one step further. I would have said, if I was one of the representatives, I would have said, well, why aren't you just handing over the unredacted, complete, full report to the House Permanent Intelligence Committee, who can handle classified, sensitive information? Why don't you just give it to them now? You can focus on the redacting whatever you want to redact, for public consumption. Instead, this son of a bitch is taking the long route first because he wants to drag it out.
Slow walking, sure.
He's slow walking it in the hopes that it'll go down the memory hole or something else will crop up or whatever. It's like it's so obvious what he's doing. But nobody questioned him on that. It's like, well, why don't you just hand it over to them? Hand it over to the committee, and you've got that out of the way, and then you can work on your color coding. Here you go with this. I can't imagine what the costs for the printer cartridges are going to be for the Siam and everything.
Oh God, the highlighters alone are going to run into the millions.
Oh yeah, exactly.
But the other part of it is, I think it really is, no matter how bad the strategy is, Darlene, it's part of a strategery.
Oh yes.
And one of them is slow walking, but the other one is to get people to focus on that Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, 6D?
6E.
Or 6E, yeah.
Yeah, that old damn 6E again.
And the fact of the matter is that's easily enough remedied. You put it, and see, that's what he's afraid of, though. If he redacts, or if he just redacts the 6E stuff and hands it over, then they go to court with that, but they see, they'll see the big board. They see everything else. The point is to keep people from seeing what's in it. And by people, we mean people with security clearances.
Right.
But the fact that he did not just take it and say, okay, I'm marching this over in front of a judge, and I'm going to let the judge make the call on the 6E stuff.
Right.
That simple fact tells us that he's got an agenda that extends well beyond protecting the sanctity of the grand jury.
Yes, exactly, because he testified that he had no intentions of doing that. He's going to be it's going to be up to Nadler.
Right, they're going to the game here, and again, it's across the board. It's Barr, it's Mnuchin, it's the IRS guy, it's what's his name, John Dorn, was it? In regard to the census question, they're just going to say no and dare the Congress to try to do something about it, because the power of the Congress is significantly limited. especially given the current makeup of it. The House can do things. The Senate is not going to join them.
Right.
And so,
Right.
consequently, short of using that jail, and they've got to get the subjects in front of them before they can order the sergeant at arms to do anything. And see, that's what I meant, Darlene, when I said that people still maintain this fantasy, this illusion of normalcy. You know, you wouldn't do that in a normal government. But we are not in normal times, and some people refuse to acknowledge that.
Right. I mean, well, clearly the House still has its subpoena power. But then you're talking the courts that are
right. But I mean, it's kind of like what if they issue a subpoena and the guy doesn't show up? I mean, that happened today.
Right.
And so they say,
right.
well, we're going to hold you in contempt, and the guy says, I'll treat that as a badge of honor.
God, we're in so much trouble
and you say, well, by God, we're going to refer this to the Department of Justice, and Bill Barr says, fuck you.
Right. Well, then you got the Supreme Court.
I mean, it's the fact, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to walk all over your nickel or anything, but it's the fact that we have, and this is why I so often despise the multimillionaire for-profit media. This is a constitutional crisis.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I.
But where are the multimillionaire for-profit media talking heads to say that? Has anybody said that ignoring a subpoena constitutes a constitutional crisis? No. Has anybody said that contempt of Congress is no biggie? That itself is a constitutional crisis? Because I can't see that it's not, Darlene, because it means that the Constitution itself is being deemed inconsequential.
Right. Either the for-profit multi-millionaire media is in denial about it, they don't want to believe it themselves, or they just haven't picked up on it. I mean, even Blumenthal, who I appreciate, I appreciate what he's doing. He's out there, but he, he has not yet said we are in I don't think he said it yet. He said we're on the verge of it. Whereas I agree with you. I think we are already in it. And somebody's got to throw that out there, and I don't think anyone has said that, least of all Richard Blumenthal. So I don't know what kind of how much of a critical mass it has to get to before somebody wakes up and says,
I'm afraid
we're in trouble now.
On the Senate side, there is no critical mass, Darlene.
No, there isn't.
Because Mitch McConnell,
where Blumenthal is.
Mitch McConnell, who apparently, and I know this sounds all Alex Jones, but the behavior of these Senate Republicans is, and the behavior of the Republicans when they had the House, I mean, the only reason you behave like they're behaving is if you've already been shown the file folder with what they've got on you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whether it's the dead girl or the live boy, as the old saying goes, or whether it's the paper trail of the rubles that wound up in your account or in your campaign war chest, somebody's got something.
Right.
The degree of blind loyalty. When Lindsey Graham said, "I'm just happy to be living in Trump's world," I mean, Jesus Christ, Darlene.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell happened to him. Because he was totally against Trump in the beginning, but
we can engage in rank speculation. Trump is. You'll not convince me that Trump is not and has not been for most of his adult life mobbed up, and so maybe in the file folder is just a picture of an umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And his address.
Could very well be. Could very well be.
I mean,
I still think though, seeing what happened with Craig, who was the ex-Obama official.
Yeah.
That and whatever he did after he left the Obama administration. And he's being indicted. Then what happened with Assange today or yesterday in Great Britain. I think that it'll be interesting to see. It seems like there's still some fallout from the Mueller report that we might not. That there may be more fallout coming in ways that we haven't imagined yet. So I'm kind of watching that and thinking that maybe more stuff is coming. And the fact that a formerly tight-lipped, assuming these reports are correct, from the New York Times and the Post, and it doesn't sound as though there's been any pushback or anything that said it's not true. The fact that some of these team members, former special counsel team members, started speaking up, I think is
yeah,
revealing.
but they're sure by God not speaking to anybody who's put a microphone in front of their face.
Well, yeah. I don't know if we're talking FBI agents or attorneys that were working under him.
And see, this is a great opportunity. I don't know if either one of us meant to open this door, but we have, and I think we should go through it.
Okay.
This is a great opportunity to draw a very bright line distinction between the actions of a Julian Assange and, say, an FBI whistleblower from the Mueller team.
Okay.
An FBI whistleblower from the Mueller team, by leaking the Mueller report, would arguably be doing a patriotic service. Whereas the WikiLeaks release of the hacked Democratic emails was solely for malicious purposes to achieve a stated political end. I mean, can you see a broad gulf between those two things?
Yes, I don't necessarily think that the Republicans would treat the FBI leaker any better. But yeah, I mean, I would think that a person who would leak that, although I think somebody that worked under Robert Mueller and the FBI said that they won't do that, that they won't leak. But I think there is a chasm there, and that clearly whoever spoke with the New York Times and the Post cares about this country, whereas Julian Assange doesn't give a shit about this country. He wants to see it
crumble.
Crumble, yeah.
And of course, I would be remiss if I did not mention in this context the fact that a young woman named Reality Winner
yes.
is rotting in a damn prison for telling us something that was absolutely true that we desperately needed to know.
Mm-hmm.
I have sympathy for her. I think she should be out. I think she should be pardoned. But that's another not going to happen.
Well, we have the other lady who with the security clearances that recently blew the whistle, and I don't recall her name. This is recent news where she brought up her concerns about the security clearance violations going on in the White House. And it's interesting. It's interesting because Chuck Grassley is a big protector of whistleblowers. Supposedly in the Senate. I don't know where he stands on it, but in keeping with that, he should be completely on board with what she's doing, even though it's against his party.
Yeah, don't hold your breath on that.
No.
I mean, didn't Grassley recently publicly state leave Brittany alone about Trump's taxes? I think he did.
Was it him? No, I thought he may have said that he wanted. I thought he wanted them released, or he said they should be. But again, they're gonna. Again, what are they doing? They're handing it over to Barr.
Yeah.
He's a stopgap. I mean, and I don't understand. Really. What's in it for Barr? I mean, he's fucking this up from the get-go.
Well, I think this is constitutional, little c constitutional, with Barr. It's what Barr likes to do. He's got a history. He likes to he's some sort of weird-ass true believer. I mean, and you know, given his performance for Bush, he's got a vision of executive power that he wants to see ascendant and triumphant. And this is part of that. And he can't like it, and he's got to know that he is now being referred to as Trump's Roy Cohn. But he didn't much mind back when he was being pilloried for the filthy bit of business that he did on behalf of George H.W. Bush. And by the way, again, with the appearances thing, how weird is it to have an attorney general who looks like Pepe the Frog?
I think Stephen Colbert said he looks like a bullfrog that swallowed John Goodman.
Oh dear God, that's true.
You know. Now here, Grassley says he wants Trump's tax return when House gets. Let's see. I thought he was kind of on board with that. Let's see. When the House gets them. So I guess.
Yeah, y'all do all the heavy lifting, and I'll just be waiting right here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. One of the few Republicans with the power to request his tax returns wants to make sure that if House Democrats are successful in getting them, he wants to see them too. Oh wow! Well, that's really straddling the line.
Yeah, just sign the letter, Chuck.
Oh God. Yeah. So we're in this pattern here where we can't get anywhere. They just keep saying no, and I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into John Gardner because I was like, oh my God, you brought him up this evening, and I wanted to talk to you about him a couple of weeks ago, maybe about 2 or 3 weeks ago, concerning Trump. And I was getting all excited because you're having a conversation with Todd from South Carolina.
Yeah.
And I tried to call in, but I think he was on the stress line and I couldn't get through. But John Gardner, he's been a teacher at the Department of Psychiatry for like 28 years at Johns Hopkins. And there's this young fellow called David Pakman.
Yeah, I know
him.
him.
You've seen him on he seems fairly progressive, and he has a YouTube program, and I guess he periodically checks in with John Gardner. And what you were talking about is the same thing as that, because I watched this interview, and it came right on the heels of the CPAC speech, Trump's CPAC speech. And he's referred to Trump as having what he calls a flagrant thought disorder. And, he mentioned things like schizophrenia, but he also mentioned what I had brought up to you the last time I spoke, or we spoke, or second to last time, was the whole concept of personality disorders.
Right.
And he said that he said that Trump's, he called it cognitive slippage, is what he called it. Cognitive slippage is getting worse by the day. And he's very concerned about how, like the media and many people in this country, are normalizing what he's doing. And I remember Todd brought up the whole thing about the possibility that Trump has dyslexia. But John Gardner's like, well, maybe he does, but this is not dyslexia. This has nothing to do with dyslexia in terms of calling people the wrong names, like Tim Apple, as opposed to, Tim Cook. And he says that he feels that Trump is in a pre-dementia phase of cognitive decline. And, like, if you compare, and there's, and Trump's trying to hide shit, right? We all know he's trying to hide his medical records, his educational, his report cards and everything from school, but he really can't hide all the videos, at least not yet, the videos out there of what he was like years ago. And so Gardner was saying that back then he actually sounded relatively intelligent. And that now he can barely complete a sentence. He overuses superlatives, which he said is also, the overuse of superlatives is an example of dementia. And that he basically is like a shadow, a shadow of his former self. And they also brought up the whole issue of the time of day. You know, is he worse at certain points in the day? You know, and my dear aunt is in full dementia now. And when I went to see her, my cousin was like, you know, come to see her after she's had her lunch because she's better. She's a little bit sharper, and they're very good. Like my aunt, I could tell my aunt did not know who I was, but she faked it. Like she knew who I was, you know. They call this thing, like, I guess what they call it is sundowning.
Yes.
Sundowning, where and I guess that there was, he mentioned, John Gardner mentioned the time he got off the plane on the tarmac and he couldn't find the limo.
Yep.
And it was in the evening, and somebody that he knows says, geez, he looks like my uncle who's sundowning, very disoriented. So maybe later in the day he gets worse. And then the whole thing with the Candyman, who you call the Candyman.
Oh, Ronnie.
Ronnie Jackson, yeah. So he brought up, I guess, the test that Ronnie Jackson did.
Yeah, the Montreal multiphasic.
Yeah, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and that and of course Trump passed with flying colors, but that is very basic. That's to screen for gross dementia. It doesn't measure more subtle signs of cognitive decline, like where Gardner believes that Trump is at. It won't catch somebody at that initial level because it's basic shit. Like the MCA is basically, can you draw a clock? Can you identify a lion? Can you differentiate between a lion and a camel?
Repeat three numbers, a three-number sequence backwards. 1,
right,
6, 8. So you'd say 8, 6, 1.
Right. It's
and
very
and the thing is, he's so far gone, Darlene, that when they gave it to him, he came out and said, "And I passed it with flying colors, and that's because I'm a genius."
Yeah, I'm a stable genius. But it's a very rudimentary test. So even if you're in an advanced stage of cognitive decline, but you're not so demented that you need to be institutionalized, you can pass the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. So Ronnie Jackson played everybody, you know. This enabling is unbelievable, but he said that considering what he was like years ago, what Trump was like years ago, he said he's like 2 standard deviations. He's 2 standard where he was years ago was 2 standard deviations ahead of where he is now, because he was fairly articulate in the 1980s, and he had some education, you know. And I guess if you have, like, you're fairly well educated, you can easily pass this Montreal test.
Oh,
and
sure. I mean, if you're oriented to time, place, and what? Time, place, and there's 3. You can pass that test.
Time, place, and
which means I probably couldn't pass the test, and that's disturbing because I can't remember those 3 things.
Well, he mentioned the Goldwater rule. And he covered the gamut in this interview. It was really interesting. And he mentioned the Goldwater rule, and he spoke with someone who had sat on a committee that came up with the Goldwater rule, and that was based on Freudian psychology and ethics. The committee just didn't want irresponsible public statements coming out from psychiatrists and psychologists, but it was never meant to be a complete gag order. Well, that's what he had said, and I know we talked about. Yeah.
No, I keep coming back to that one little clause that I talked about in the in Section 4 of the 25th Amendment. Or such group as Congress may by law provide.
Yeah, that's what I brought up to you. I said, I'm confused on that. Remember, we had a long conversation. I said, this is giving Congress some power here.
Well, I went back and perused a little history.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned Thomas Riley Marshall on this program a couple of times. And honest to God, I've taken to referring to that clause as the Thomas Riley Marshall Clause. Because in the disability of Woodrow Wilson, the Congress begged Thomas Riley Marshall, the Vice President of the United States, ironically also from Indiana, to declare himself acting president. And he said, I'll do that if Congress will give me the power to do it. Now, this is one of those little nuanced legal thingies. Because we all know, because we've seen I'm Only a Bill on Capitol Hill, Schoolhouse Rock, that the traditional way that a bill becomes a law is that the bill is introduced in Congress, it passes one house, it passes the other house, and then it's signed into law by the president. That's how a bill becomes a law, correct?
Yes.
Well, this is a matter. This isn't a law. This is a part of the Constitution,
right.
And the Constitution is the essential enabling document of government. And I know you've got the same kind of education that I do, i.e., a law degree. But I want to go through this slowly for my own purposes. I'm not going through it slowly because of you or anyone else. It's me. I've come to the conclusion that what I refer to as the Thomas Riley Marshall Clause is predicated upon a vice president unwilling to act and a cabinet unwilling to act. So that the Congress itself can do something that does not require the signature of the president. Because how do you get an incapacitated president to sign a bill that the president is too incapacitated to sign, and the vice president can't because he isn't acting president? You with me?
Yes. Yep. I'm totally with you.
So if the Congress were to use the Thomas Riley Marshall Clause of Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, if it passed both houses of Congress, then a commission would be established, and I'm just calling it a commission, to determine the mental health, in this case, and the technical term out of because the term is fitness to perform to fulfill the duties of office or something like that. But in this case, we're talking about his mental health. Then that commission reporting back to Congress, if they reported back that he is incapable of fulfilling the duties of his office, then all that other stuff that happens in Section 4 is triggered congressionally. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right, yeah, that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. That's in Section 3, and Section 4 follows. Yeah, but all that business about about the vice president and a majority of the cabinet becomes mooted by the Thomas Riley Marshall Commission. But it sounds like in order for that to be triggered, though, there has to be the way I'm reading it, reading the 25th, is that Section 4 that it has to initially be triggered by the cabinet and the
no, I don't. That's
president. You don't think so?
That's what I'm arguing, that it doesn't.
That it does not.
Because in analyzing Section 4, I guess more in the way that my grandmother, the one-room school teacher, would have diagrammed a sentence, as opposed to looking at it through the lens of the stylized approach that we have to governance now. It starts out, whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide. In other words, the vice president might still be in the game, but if Congress provides for that commission, then the commission reports back to the vice president, and if the vice president doesn't do anything, well, I guess impeachment.
Or if such other body as Congress may by law provide. Yeah, I suppose that could be extracted because, and could be its own engine because, say, for example, Pence did that, and it didn't go anywhere, but Congress did create like a commission, and that commission would exist so that if somebody else came in and needed to be removed because it could not discharge the duties of the office, powers and duties of the office, that commission is still there, so it could feasibly act independently without it necessarily having to be triggered by the cabinet and the vice president coming forward and saying he needs to be removed.
Well, it seems like there's two interpretations here. One is that Congress provides for the body, and the body goes to the vice president, or else the body stands alone. And again, I go back in history to Thomas Riley Marshall,
right,
who said, "I'll act if you give me legal authority under the Constitution to act."
To act.
So either
that's a little hidden gem in there, isn't it?
Well, I've been.
It is a hidden gem.
Well, I think it's there for a reason, Darlene.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I think
that's why I was questioning. I'm like,
and I think this? Thomas Riley Marshall is the answer. Because by the time this amendment was drafted, there was plenty of 20/20 hindsight on what happened in the wake of the failure of the League of Nations treaty, and everybody understood that led to the rise of Adolf Hitler, and frankly, it also led to the rise of the I guess we'll call them fascists in Japan. And a League of Nations could have banded together to act in contravention against of both. But because Wilson was incapacitated, and because his stroke came after a whirlwind nationwide tour in support of the League of Nations treaty. So he had deeply offended Henry Cabot Lodge. And the feeling was that, well, doggone it, Thomas Riley Marshall, who was, he was a bit of a wag and a wit, but he also knew government in a way, and again, this is another one of those Trumpian similarities. Woodrow Wilson was a college president. He was an academic. He was the antithesis of Trump. But they shared one thing in common, and that was a sort of unfamiliarity with the inner workings of governance. Thomas Riley Marshall did not lack for that. So the thinking was that he could maybe go back and get the League of Nations treaty ratified. For what it's worth. But the larger issue was the fact that the president, the country was operating without a president. You couldn't sign a budget. You couldn't sign a budget bill. You couldn't sign a declaration of national emergency. You couldn't do any of the things that the president did because Wilson's wife was keeping everybody from seeing how incapacitated he was.
Right.
And I know maybe some people say, "Oh yeah, they're Bob with that history shit again," but this is directly on point, Darlene.
It is. So why? So because Woodrow Wilson's wife was hiding things, is that why Congress did not act at Marshall's request?
Well, there was no 25th Amendment, so there was no way to get a bill signed.
I see. So you're saying that this whole Marshall that the 25th drew from the Marshall Act, basically that clause.
I think that clause does.
There. Okay. And I mean, the problem is that we do not have a Congress that will set up a commission because of the Senate.
I think I think the House would.
The House, yes, the House definitely would. But I recall we discussed that I guess maybe it doesn't need to be approved by the Senate. Because the way that we were talking about Section 4 reading, that it would have, again, it goes back to the president. It would have to have it would have to go from the House to the Senate for their approval, and then it would have to be signed in by the president.
But what I'm
right?
saying is, if the situation is as it was in that era in 1919, then since this is constitutional, maybe it doesn't require a presidential signature. And I realize that's kind of out there, but again, this is not a law. This is a part of the Constitution, which means that it's outside the boundaries of the ordinary day-to-day legislative process.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's fundamental law.
Now, the thing, after the body, as Congress may by law provide, does its work, then the letter has to be transmitted to the President pro tem of the Senate and the Speaker of the House. And the question there is, who signs the letter? Just the members of the body? And because I spend a lot of my time doing it, I can't. We're in a place where you have to game this stuff out 3 or 4 moves out, 5 or 6 if you're Gary Kasparov. What if the body Congress provides by law includes the Vice President of the United States, whether he likes it or not?
You mean that this mental health commission includes the vice president?
Yeah. What if the Congress passes a law that says, we're going to have John Gardner, and or whoever the leading lights of mental, we're going to have a neurologist, and we're going to forcibly subject him to a CT scan or an MRI of his brain. Because remember, at the time this was written, there were no CTs, there was no MRI,
right?
There were no definitive diagnostic tools that we have in the so-called modern era.
Well, they were still stuck in Freudian psychology, because they didn't switch to DSM until the 1980s. So what I read to you before the last time we spoke was sort of the foundation or the precursor to the DSM. At the time that they were coming up with the 25th. So they were still stuck in Freudian psychology, and the DSM didn't officially exist. And that was based on, and the DSM is based on observable behavior and also informants.
And so what if this body comes up with a report, and let's say they operate on democratic principles, and the enabling legislation, the provided by law part, says that the report shall contain the signatures of every member of the commission. Then you've got the vice president's signature, and bang, to the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem. I mean, I know this seems out there, but how else? The president is mad, Darlene.
Oh, I agree.
This isn't the 18th century, and we're not talking about George III. And that was bad for Britain then, or even better, what was it, Charles VI of France, one of those Charleses. And France fell apart. And that's an absolute monarch. And the other part of this is that some of these things are not being done by Trump. And we kind of have to separate those out. What are the things that are Trump, and what are the things that are the political philosophies of evil men being transmitted through him? Like the purge at DHS, that is obviously the work of Stephen Miller. Or, as I learned to refer to him yesterday, Pee Wee Herman Goering.
That was great. Dr. John, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's perfect. I mean, the way I don't know, I know it's way out there, and what's tripping me up is this reading section for it. It still seems like it comes back to Congress having to assemble and determine by 2/3 vote, whatever the vehicle might be, whether it's the vice president or it's this other body as Congress may by law provide. I'd like that not to be the case. It'd be interesting if somehow this was somehow presented to see what Nancy Pelosi would do with it, because she kind of cherry picks the Constitution when it suits her. It's like, well, she's not big on impeachment, but she'll bring up other parts of the Constitution that she seems to like.
Well, but impeachment. Impeachment is the reason she's not big on that is because she wants to keep her majority. She likes being Speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing mandatory about impeachment. It is entirely, and even the framers make clear that it's entirely a political act. Now, something that I tried to make is that this is, this is part of the evolutionary process of institutions. You can apply it, for instance, to the early Christian cult, and it goes from a personal cult to an ecclesiastical cult evolutionarily. And as it progresses, it becomes more sclerotic.
Yes, good word. I saw that word this week, too. That's like my new favorite word, sclerotic. Rigid and...
Yeah, rigid, hardened, incapable of flexibility.
Yeah, good word usage. Yeah.
Thank you. I got that one on the fly, but... So the same thing has happened over the course of the life of this nation. The guys in the velvet knee breeches and the powdered wigs envisioned the legislative branch, which they put first in the Constitution. They were mortally afraid of any one person holding too much power. So they gave the purse and the approval of everything the president does to the House and the Senate. And they also gave the House and the Senate the power to lightly keep their hands around the chief executive's neck.
Yeah.
And they envisioned that they would keep their hands around his neck and would begin to squeeze if he began to get too big for his knee breeches.
Yeah, the only problem is he's only got one hand around the neck.
And that's but the thing is, generally speaking, that has been abandoned long since.
Mm.
I mean, that was probably abandoned by Martin Van Buren's time. Or Andrew Jackson's, to say that is probably a better example. Mm. But it does exist as a tool. And frankly, that 2/3 vote, I think if you set it up right, the vote is upon the question. I know that sounds simplistic, but the vote's upon the question, and so it becomes a matter of how you frame the question.
Okay.
And the question is set up in Section 4 such that, is the president unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office?
Right.
And the thing is, it says Congress has to decide the issue, assembling within 48 hours for that purpose, if not in session. And that the two-thirds vote happens either within 21 days after receipt of the letter, or if not in session, within 21 days after Congress is required to assemble. So they have to assemble within 48 hours of the purpose, and then there's 21 days of debate and consideration.
It's not in session.
Right. And then the vote is two-thirds.
On the question.
On the question. And in that narrow, limited scope, I mean, what is some senator going to filibuster that? Because I'd like, I present all of this, Darlene, as an alternative to what I said scares the living bejesus out of me earlier. And that's a military coup. Because this asshole's running around saying, oh, the Mueller investigation was an attempted coup. It was a coup.
Right. Yeah, now that's his latest thing.
And that's evidence, too, because it means, he's more paranoid than General Jack D. Ripper out at Burleson Air Force Base.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's often an outcropping of narcissism. Yeah.
And dementia.
True.
So, I don't know. It's just a little tiny radio program, but this is one of those things that nobody else has mentioned. It's almost like nobody knows who Thomas Riley Marshall was. And nobody's noticed that other body as Congress may by law provide. And then asking, what the hell does that mean?
Right, and I would assume that our Congress critters, have little pocket constitutions that they could be looking at. I don't think very many of them do.
You can buy them in the gift shop. I know this for a fact.
So they're there. I guess, say this tiny little program that you're talking about, I think one of the nicest, almost like big picture things was that you mentioned was the first photos of the first ever photos of the black hole. That kind of like, it's sort of, it's like a 30,000-foot view, or in this case, a 53.49 million light-year view, where it's like we're so insignificant. When you see something like that, that's out there and churning around, and we get so caught up in what's going on here, but there's a whole damn universe out there. And I think my favorite phrase of the year now is with all those telescopes working together. It's called I guess those telescopes, the multi-telescope method is referred to as the Very Long Baseline Interferometry. I love that. So that kind of was like, because
that's a Vilby. That's a Vilby.
It's a Vilby?
Vilby.
A Vilby, yeah, a Vilby.
So we've got a new whatever we call that. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on, Darlene. Stand by. The Bluetooth dropped. Stupid gizmo. Back in a minute. There, we're all better now.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There, I can hear you now. But that was sort of like a relief. It's like, oh yeah, there's a whole universe out there. It's not all Trump and his insanity and everything.
Yeah, this is when you go and you check back in on Carl Sagan's little blue dot speech.
Exactly.
Or pale blue dot.
Exactly.
And that other black hole that's shooting jets of matter from some other universe into ours, that's the one I want a picture of.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm spoiled. Oh, well, yeah, we got a picture of black holes. Never been done before. Yeah, but I want the other black hole. Because,
what about that other one?
Well, no, the idea that there are massive jets of matter or energy or something from some other universe spouting into ours?
Where did you see that story? Because I'd like to look at that because I'll tell you that really stretches my mind, is trying to understand multiverses and multi-universes and things like that. I'm just like, oh my God. Because I'm like you, I'm not a math and science
it was referred to in the same story in advance of the release of of this black hole picture.
National Geographic?
Let me see. Just a moment. I got it here somewhere.
But Einstein kind of keeps proving to be right. Seems like he's.
So it's from a Gizmodo. It's a Gizmodo story.
Okay.
And there it is. The targets of the telescopes observing runs thus far have been Sagittarius A. I guess what is that?
That's in our
radio wave emitting region of our galaxy that looks a whole lot like a supermassive black hole with a mass 4 million times that of the sun, as well as the center of the galaxy M87, where there is presumably another supermassive black hole. This one around 7 billion times the mass of the sun, and spewing a high-energy jet of matter. And just that phrase, a high-energy jet of matter, makes my head spin.
That's the M87 they're referencing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what it means is if there's a black hole spewing anything into this universe, it means that black holes have back doors.
That is true.
Wouldn't that mean that
that would make sense?
The front end of that black hole is in another universe?
Well, yeah, because if it's just so dense that it's just there's nothing going on inside, right? Typically, it's all. There's your spaghetti monster too, by the way. Because did you read what would happen to you if you got past the event horizon towards the most dense part of the hole itself? That you would be ripped into you'd be shredded into spaghetti. Is what they said. Yeah. there's your spaghetti monster.
But it is. But I mean, if it is.
But where's it coming from? Where is that?
Right, and whatever is getting sucked into the black hole in Sagittarius apparently has an output on the other end. I mean, I'm sorry that my little human mind immediately it goes to images of waste elimination, but it, that M87 makes me feel like that we're in the multiverse, that we're the outhouse. But if Sagittarius is shooting the other way, maybe all the universe. Jesus, this is why I'm not a physicist.
Neither am I. Because I find it.
They write in little Greek letters and shit, and what? Yeah.
Well, I find it to be a relief sometimes just to kind of take that step back and say, we get really caught up in our own stuff going on here, and obviously with good reason, but I guess in the grander scheme of things,
well,
there's black holes sucking shit up.
Yeah, well, and as Agnes pointed out, this all goes back to the end of the first Men in Black movie, which I presume everyone has by now seen. Mm-hmm. And, the central line of that whole film, the galaxy is on Orion's belt. And the movie ends with some great galactic creature playing marbles with universes. So
Well,
that.
when they were stalking, speaking of Men in Black, when they were stalking Robert Mueller there as he was going in and out of his office, he had I don't know if you saw this picture, he had these Men in Black sunglasses on. And I'm looking, it's like, I wish he had that, what is that, memory eraser pen?
Yeah.
You could hit us with it, we could forget the whole
goddamn... Yeah, the flashy thingy. Yeah, how many times did flashy thingy meet? Oh, never did. You sure? No.
It's like, forget the report, forget everything.
Forget Trump. Hey, Darlene, it's been a lovely conversation. Thanks for going all over the place with me. I always appreciate it.
I always do. I had to. There's just so much going on, but I had to bring up the whole thing about the black holes because I think that's really cool. Yeah, that's cool, and again, it's sort of a relief to look at something much bigger than us.
It gives one perspective.
Yes, exactly.
Darlene, have a lovely evening.
You too, Bob. Take care. Bye.
The one and only Darlene calling from Connecticut. So, again, Ralph's challenge got met. Now we are working on the challenge from Randy and PA. When billionaires choose, you lose. And that's why y'all choose this program, because I ain't no billionaire. There's $100 on the table that thus far looks like it's been largely ignored. And I have another challenge to add, because if both Ralph's challenge and Randy's challenge were met, we'd still be in the hole, because the whole evening's $390. And so from Tracy, and I'm going right back to the phones, the Nipsey Hussle Memorial Challenge. Today was the memorial service for father, son, brother, partner, rapper, activist, entrepreneur, and community leader Nipsey Hussle. While I honestly had never heard his music before his death, it was in reading about him after his murder that I found out who he was and his impact on the community of South Los Angeles. He loved where he came from. He loved his community so much that it was very important to give back by investing in it. He employed people in the neighborhood, and he also founded a STEM and robotics program for kids that otherwise wouldn't have access to those services because they're relegated to underserved neighborhoods and schools. He was killed almost 35 years to the day that my musical hero Marvin Gaye was taken from us. And when I heard that news, a sense of mourning hit me that I can't explain. So I know how his fans felt on March 31st, 2019. I felt the same way on April 1st, 1984. It is a loss that it will take a while to get over, but we will, because we must not wallow in our pain and sorrow, but use it to energize us to continue their vision and put an end to the violence that has taken another young black man away from us much too soon. So in honor of Nipsey Hussle, I offer a $25 challenge in his memory. I can only hope that another young black man won't be a victim of senseless gun violence, but I know that that's too much to ask. Rest in power, my brother. You will be missed. And I checked out a little bit, and it is, I can understand the reason why he was as loved as he was and is. So thank you, Tracy. There is a challenge of $25 on the table. If met, that would mean that we would have only $290 to go. And if Randy's is met, then that would leave only $90, and we'll just carry that over till tomorrow evening. Thank you, Tracy. And, there's another story out there that needs to be gotten to. And it drove me crazy earlier today. They busted the guy who burned 3 churches down in Louisiana, and he's the son of a law enforcement official in Louisiana. By the way, Will in Chicago has met Tracy's challenge. Thank you, Will. Thank you very kindly. So now, hopefully, in the next 40 minutes, we can meet Randy's challenge. And that's wonderful. But it will be wonderful. So the kid in Louisiana, the son of the law enforcement official, gets busted for burning down 3 churches, 2 of them African-American churches. And God damn it all to hell, if the first headline I don't see about it is, church arsonist in Louisiana may have been influenced by black metal music. I guess we'll just twist ourselves into pretzels, trying not to address. I mean, it's just like, well, obviously that guy who shot up the school was influenced by violent video games, not his access to a gun, or the constant stream of hate that is available to anybody who wants to go out and find it and interact with it. No, black metal music. I don't even know what black metal music is. I don't, is it like speed metal or death metal? I'm not up on my metal because Geezer, even if Geezer was the name of a great metal musician, probably Geezer Butler, right? Is it metal by black people, or is it just a brand of metal music that I don't know, but it's probably not why he burnt down the churches? Sorry. Let's go over and check in with Todd, shall we? Hey, Todd.
Bob, how's it going?
I had a little mini hissy there, but I think I'm okay.
That was a great call, by the way.
Oh, Darlene's wonderful.
Have you done the Nipsey hustle yet?
Well, I just did the challenge, and it just got met.
Well, I understand. That was actually supposed to be a joke. It was a song in the 70s. And the head of it, the chorus, do the hustle. I was like, do the Nipsey hustle. Just
well. And I thought it was a play on the guy who was a perennial presence on 70s game shows, Nipsey Russell.
Oh, Nipsey Russell with all yes. Oh, we do remember Nipsey. Yes, we do. Oh, so much. So listen, if someone goes, if a person happens to go out and just shoot people, and they say, well, what happened? And he said, well, I went to the library and I was influenced by history, and I just couldn't take it. I mean, where does this end?
You got me.
Is that congruent in terms of logic?
Well, I mean,
Okay,
no. It's damned interesting, Todd, because I mean, I'm wondering, let's say somebody does something here, and they say, I was influenced by John Brown. Because remember, when Virginia hanged John Brown, William Lloyd Garrison praised him as a martyr and a hero.
Yes.
So, but the thing is, they never say that. What you wind up with are these stupid okay, while we're talking, let's just look this up. What is black metal?
Black metal is a white supremacist heavy metal type of music. That's what I heard. I don't know. I'd look it up because I'm not online right this second. But that's what I heard.
Okay, well, we're going to rely on Wikipedia for this. An extreme subgenre of heavy metal music. Common traits include fast tempos, a shrieking vocal style, heavily distorted guitars played with tremolo picking, raw recording, unconventional song structures, and an emphasis on atmosphere. Artists often appear in corpse paint and adopt pseudonyms.
Well, that's all we need to know then, isn't it?
During the 1980s, several thrash metal and death metal bands formed a prototype for black metal.
Minstrel metal. That's what it should be called, minstrel metal. Black metal. That's minstrel. Man, what the... Okay, I'm not going to curse. I'm really not.
Apparently it was big in Sweden and Norway. Initially a synonym for satanic metal, black metal has often sparked controversy. Many artists express extreme anti-Christian and misanthropic views, advocating various forms of Satanism or ethnic paganism. In the 1990s, members of the scene were responsible for a spate of church burnings and murders. There's a small neo-Nazi movement within black metal, although it's been shunned by many prominent artists. Generally, black metal strives to remain underground, inaccessible to the mainstream, and those who are not committed.
Like committed to an institution?
No, not committed to the movement. And so and basically it's a bunch of the face paint they use looks like a sort of Kiss wannabe tribute band who's really bad at the makeup.
Oh, okay. Okay. The angry, disaffected youth. They're just angry.
But I don't think so much with the youth. I mean, I'm looking at a guy in face paint here who's probably 35. A common black metal convention is the use of corpse paint, black and white makeup intended to make the wearer look inhuman, corpse-like, or demonic. Shown here, Talroth of French pagan black metal band Hindveer.
Wait, wasn't Trump a drummer in that band when he was in boarding school?
Wait a minute. Yeah, you get one of those.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, my God. Look. Why are we not surprised? You know.
But why do we have to talk about black metal when the dude is burning black churches? I mean, if you're burning black churches, isn't it pretty obvious what your motivation is?
But Bob, to be a black person and to hear that he's not in law enforcement, but his father is associated with law enforcement, and that just has a terrible, terrible tinge to it. It does something different to that whole situation. It really does. But you know, maybe you can get another call, but I really want to thank you for broaching the subject about the poor mental health of the president, because we've been talking about this for years. And the second time, Bandy Lee came out the second time with another cohort of people. You know that because you talked about it.
Right, yeah.
So to me, this is actually the most impactful unreported story in the world. I mean, in The Guardian, Al Haaretz, BBC, anywhere, because of the power that this individual has. And we should all be frightened. We should all be frightened because remember, Trump speak. He said, "Oh, I've not read the report, but I could if I wanted to." That means he read it. I mean, we all know that. Remember, he said that about Sessions. I could get involved with that if I wanted to, but I won't. I could. I mean, that's kind of basic. We all understand that. But in other words, what is it going to take if the osteopathic surgeon says, well, you have a severe fissure and a fracture in your pelvis, and you definitely shouldn't jog, but you really shouldn't walk around, and you need to just come in. We need to fix it. And what do? You go jogging. And what happens? What do you think happens?
What was you were warned about?
What you were warned about.
I mean, this is why I do not play golf. I've been warned not to because the backswing could make my spleen go pop, and, I'd bleed to death on the golf course before anybody can get to me. Because no health insurance.
Well, so, I take this very seriously. And I just don't understand why the regular news media is not on top of this unless they just don't want to follow it up because it's too frightening as to where it will lead. You see, and you hit it on the head, and you hit it on the head, I think, when you talked about every day, every hour, we're in constitutional crisis because, first of all, the president uses an unsecured cell phone. An unsecured cell phone.
There's that.
There's that. Let's put that in that, over there in that platoon. And then the military knows the people around him. Tony Schwartz was on what was he doing? Ari, whatever, some show on MSNBC today. And I remember Tony Schwartz said long ago, and he may have a degree in psychology. I don't know. A lot of people do. But he said, Trump will not give up power, and he's he used the right terminology to describe that Trump was mentally ill, and he was around him every day for a year. So everyone's telling us this. Then the mental health professionals, then other folks who just have basic educations in that field. And I'm glad you brought up this. This is what lay people don't understand about psychology, and now leave it alone. It's such a broad diaspora. People get confused and they don't know. If you looked at the diaspora, the whole discipline as a totem pole, and at the top of the totem pole, which means the premier, would be neuroscience, and at the bottom would be psychotherapy, things of that nature, and behaviorism, cognitive behavior therapy. That's near the top because those are sciences. Those are things you can replicate. You see, now it's not that the terms that are used in DSM are off. Some of them are questionable. There's a panel,
and that's why they periodically revise them.
Exactly, and that's what it's a fluid document, and that's right, exactly. And I know I spoke against it only because I'll be honest. Like when you were in school, when I was in school, you had to make a choice, and that's why I went toward neuroscience because I'm gonna tell you, they get made fun of, the psychotherapists. It's just because it's a joke. It's not a science. It's not, and they're not going to tell you that. But it's not a science. So I just wanted to get that out there. And you see, I'm so glad that whoever wrote that article, that he's a practicing mental health professional, because it's so obvious that the dementia/Alzheimer's is presenting, and it's frightening. We don't know what. Listen, when you start, you know what? I'm gonna tell you this. What put me over the edge going toward neuroscience is when I learned about sodium potassium pumps. Because when you learn about the intricacies of these microchemicals in your blood, this magnesium, potassium, salt, if you by all rights, if you eat a bag of Doritos, it should kill you. It really should. But because we have semi-permeable membranes in some of our cells and things like that, and blood-brain barrier, it doesn't kill us. It's amazing. It's amazing. So it just gets me up, man. I'm just telling you, it's just crazy stuff, and to hear these people, I don't understand how these followers, they're as demented as he is. I don't understand it. Anyway.
Oh, but I don't think anyone does. You've got people who enable, and people who obfuscate, and people who avoid the reality. And then you've got people over here on our side who know that there's a problem, but the thing is, there are no mechanisms for dealing with it. I mean, there are. I take that back. There are mechanisms. Nobody wants to use them.
They don't want to use them. And I like the word that you use, and that's something, it's amazing, man. It's out there in the ether. That's what I had been thinking about, was enable. Because let's say if you're in a family and you have someone you're living with and they have mental health issues or a substance abuse problem, which is a mental health issue, and you just let it go and it just starts to destroy the house, you're an enabler. And we have collectively as a world become enablers because everyone knows this man is not well. The mental health professionals have spoken. People who are familiar with the field have spoken. People who work in laboratories have spoken. It's obvious.
Here's my problem, Todd.
What?
And it's again, it's that bifurcation thing that I alluded to talking to Darlene.
Mm-hmm.
Brother Deacon Asa pointed out a few minutes back, you don't have to go back that many years. Go watch Trump's Letterman interview from 2013. The difference is frightening. Letterman asks him, could you write $1 billion check if you had to buy a football team tomorrow? He answered, well, not tomorrow, no way. That would involve the sale of assets, but I'm pretty sure I could swing it. he would never admit that today, and he also couldn't put together that complex a sentence. So how much of this, had he become president when he still had his mind, what kind of dictator would he have been? So the question I'm asking is it possible to separate out his dictatorial impulses from his madness? When he says crazy shit, can you say, oh, that's the crazy talking, or that's the dictator he always wanted to be talking?
Okay, I can say this as a former New Yorker in the 80s. I would say this. He used to do terrible things to run people out of their buildings. It was in the paper all the time. When he got control of a building, a rent-control building, I know I said it before, but I have to say it again. So cut the heat off in the wintertime. No hot water until everyone leaves, because everyone doesn't have the wherewithal to put the rent in escrow. There's a procedure, right? A lot of people just can't be bothered with that, so they just leave. And then, once you don't want to be living in a building and not a lot of people in there, that's just trouble. So then he takes over the building. That's sociopathic behavior. That's evil. That's vindictive. It's nasty. So, yes, see, he's always had those impulses. And like I told you before, you see, he would not pass the puck test. He would not pass the puck test. I doubt that. I'm looking at his eyes. He would not pass the puck test at all. And some people get very nasty as Alzheimer's/dementia begins to present. Some people get docile. Some people just get forgetful and just like vegetables. And some people just get crazy, nasty, and out of nowhere. It just comes out of nowhere. And you see a lot of those folks go to state hospitals because the families can't deal with them. It's too much. And I think he's that type person. But because he's always been nasty. For instance, when he took over a department store downtown New York, he promised he would save the facade. It was a wonderful WPA era sculpture. It might have been a Macy's or a Bloomingdale's. And either he sold it or it went to the dump. He didn't care.
Jesus.
See, that's what I'm saying. When you look at him longitudinally across time, his behaviors, all his behaviors are he's been in public so long. See, this is why.
But so he's always been skeevy and grasping and all of those other things. Mm-hmm. But he's something more and less than that now. I mean, are we in agreement?
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, I'm not right. I didn't mean to intimate I was negating what you said. No, absolutely. It's worse now. Look, he's liable. If he gets his feelings hurt, he will take the whole planet down. He will do that. And he's feeling cornered. He has seen that report. He knows that it's going to be ugly. And what in the hell? Let me ask you something. Now, and I'm going to really try to calm down because I'm old enough to remember watching the Iran-Contra hearing. And I really find it offensive that Oliver North even has a platform. The damage that man did to the country.
Oh, I'm offended that man is allowed to move freely in public, but that's another conversation.
So, and Bob Barr had a hand in pardoning many of those folks involved in that. And he is untrustworthy. I do not trust him. And I don't understand why you don't hear more about his history. Because that hearing, if I was watching his body language, and then he folded his hands, he said, "Well, and you'll get the rest of the report when I release it, and you'll get what I thought." And he just folded his hands. He said, "That's that. I'm a pompous old asshole, and that's what I do."
And again, it's a constitutional crisis. Is it
another
not?
one? Another one.
So why does no one refer to those as such? Oh, by the way, just a quick one. Let me point out, thank you very kindly to Lady B, who jumped in on the Nipsey Hussle Memorial Challenge. And thank you very kindly to Elizabeth.
That's beautiful.
Wait a second. Make sure I'm getting this right.
I know you have 6 monitors and 3 phones and a beeper.
You're about there. It gets a little confusing. Thank you to Elizabeth and thank you to Roberto. We are now only $50 away from meeting Randy's When Billionaires Choose, You Lose challenge. So $50 in 20 minutes. I don't know if we can do it. I hope we can.
I think you can.
Our buddy Mark in Florida wants to know if you're on Facebook or if you'd mind if I sent his email to you.
Mark.
Yeah, Mark in Florida. Semper Fi.
Mark, Florida. I don't know. I'm not a Marine, but I'll have to check. I don't know.
Yeah, you've heard Mark on the program.
Yeah. You know, I tell you, the listeners that you have, it's great when you hear people, that are able to call in.
Well, the neat thing about all this is that the members of the community who engage in conversation often find themselves with their own little fan clubs. You're one of them.
I wouldn't know.
You're one of them.
I had no idea. I just call in because, you're so, the conversation is stimulating. And I know I harp on this a lot, maybe. You know this because we talk all the time. But we are reaping the fruits of a dumbing down of society that becomes easily malleable. And it is really sad. And, when you had people saying, well, that president is too professorial, what in the hell is that supposed to mean?
Well, it means that he's too egg-headed. He's too Mr. Smarty Smart Pants. He's not stupid like America's supposed to be stupid. Because we like our smart our smart people to stay in their lanes. We don't necessarily want to hear from them out in public unless we agree with them. It's the perfect example is the tweet from last night I referenced about the black hole.
Oh, that's exciting. Mm-hmm.
Scientists, announce black hole. Public, ooh. Scientists announce that humans are destroying the ability of this planet to support human life. Public, well, that goes against my personal feelings. Bad. The perfect example, and I put the photo up on Facebook and over on Twitter and over on Instagram. While the historic hearing on mountaintop removal's health impacts was taking place in D.C. on Tuesday, Agnes was sitting back here taking screenshots.
Hope she's feeling well.
She's not great, but better-ish.
Okay.
We go back to the doctor at the end of April.
Okay.
So she was taking screenshots of the young guy who was president of the Kentucky Coal Association. I presume he still is. And made a point of telling folks that he's a Marine with 2 tours in Bush's wars. And he came home and got himself a job as the biggest coal cheerleader in Kentucky.
Oh, God, I've seen him. Oh, my God, he's dangerous. Oh, no.
So over on my Facebook page and on Instagram and on Twitter, there are 2 screenshots that Agnes got of him listening to Dr. McCauley.
He's a real jarhead, let me tell you.
Talking, and Dr. McCauley at one point, and I was watching from behind, so I saw him kind of fidget and sit up a little bit, or when Dr. McCauley said, as a result of a question, about ultrafine particulates and how dangerous they are, he made reference to the fact that he sits on the commission that deals with the particulates that poisoned so many people in Lower Manhattan when the towers came down on September 11th.
Right.
And he started talking about the fact that that's the same kind of particulates, the same kind of harm that we see in mountaintop removal areas. And so the photos that I posted on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram show this guy responding to what Dr. Macaulay was saying about what he, the two-tour Marine in the Bush Wars, came home and started doing to his fellow Americans. And it is, to say the least, telling. I'll send them to you via email. They'll blow your mind.
I would like to see that because I know the person that you're talking about. I have seen him, and I remember it because I was just like, how can you be doing like you fought for your country and now you're killing your country.
He fought for his country, and then he came home and did to his fellow Americans, his fellow Kentuckians, the same thing that the terrorists did on September the 11th. How about that?
How about that? You know these microparticulates. We start to study about it, and think the silica. I mean, any kind of it's awful. It's awful. So anytime you can wear a respirator when you're around dust, cleaning the fireplace, it's just
with the ultrafines, you have to spend real dollars to get something that will filter ultrafines.
Wow.
Because remember, black lung is on a rampant increase on mountaintop removal sites, and those guys are provided with the best respirators science can provide.
Damn. Now, I never heard you state it that way. You know, that's compelling.
I mean, we're talking about particles anywhere from 100 to 1,000 a thousandth the diameter of a human hair.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a perfect example of the cognitive dissonance that grips this country. You know, we'll agree with science as long as science agrees with us.
It's awful. I don't know what to say. I don't know what this. I mean, it's no good. No good can come of that. And they ice off the cake by having these retention, quote unquote, ponds of just coal sludge, just toxic, nasty brew. You know that no one's because we have too many regulations, right? So who's really looking at who's maintaining the structures?
Right.
It's so much. This is frightening. But you know what? I just have to change the subject because maybe you can get another call on something. I don't know. But the projection again. I think I was eating. I don't know, something. It upset my stomach when I saw the orange organism get out and say, "Oh, it's a coup! It's a coup!" And you said, I could not believe it. I mean, because that is exactly the behavior he's engaging in, a coup. You get rid of the people who are not going to fall in line.
Anything he complains about is something he has already done. It's pure projection.
This is beyond. People need to just stop. We need to have a day off. Everybody needs to stop. No work for one day and reflect. We're all caught in the rat race. This is not normal. This is the thing. This is not about politics. This is not about Hillary Clinton. This is not about Obama. This is about the safety of the world. It's that simple. I don't give a fuck who you like or don't like. This has nothing to do with that.
Oh, speaking of reflection and Hillary, I had a note in from Mike in Cascadia. Hey, Bob.
Uh-huh.
So, subject line, Trump and the black hole. So Trump said, you've got to put your name on stuff or no one remembers you. Some scientists at NASA should name some random black hole the HRC1 Most Bigly Black Hole with a big splashy announcement on MSNBC. Then some of those Hollywood limousine liberals could put together a blockbuster IMAX of Hillary mounted into a rocket to visit her namesake black hole. Trump would go apeshit, and within a week, he'd have his name on the biggest, most fabulous, blackest black hole in the universe, and 2 weeks later, he'd be strapped in on a rocket to oblivion. Problem solved. Cheers, Mike. I like problem solving.
I just saw it in a storyboard. I can see that in my mind in a storyboard. You know what I mean? Square to square.
Yeah, it's perfect. Meanwhile,
It's perfect.
Megan says, tell Todd it's early dementia mixed with malignant narcissism. Narcissistic personality disorder involves a distorted self-image. Emotions can be unstable and intense, and there is excessive concern with vanity, prestige, power, and personal adequacy. There also tends to be a lack of empathy and an exaggerated sense of superiority. Narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, is closely associated with egocentrism, a personality characteristic in which people see themselves and their interests and opinions as the only ones that really matter.
Ding.
Ding. Ding. I know.
Well, speaking of the spaceship, there's a lot of interesting things going on in space. Have you been taking notice of this asteroid that has been emanating signals, and it looks like an old spaceship?
Yeah, that's one of those I kind of go, ah.
Okay.
But no, there's there's at least one scientist out there who says, hey, it could be.
Yeah, it did get a little shot down, but the one thing, and I have to say this about Richard Hoagland, he was right about a lot of things early on. He kept saying there's water on Mars, and this is way back in the 90s. And, here we are. It's like, oh, yeah, there is water on Mars, and it congregates near the poles. Now there's methane emissions that they see. It's a lot going on. Now I don't know if that's why Trump wants to do the Space Force thing, because he listens to Alex Jones and Lou Dobbs of all people, that little troll. Can you imagine taking advice from him?
Oh, dear God.
Well, anyway.
Or for that matter, the Hannity job.
Yeah, I didn't want to. I listened to him the other day, Rush, and Rush lied like, I don't know, he just lies. He just doesn't give a damn. But they're both dangerous. But Hannity is just dangerous, and he physically is violent, pulling guns on people and whatnot. You should never do that.
IOKIYAR.
Yeah, well, you try it.
Well,
hey,
I ain't a Republican now, am I?
Well, no, I don't think so. No, you're not.
So there we are.
Damn it. Well, anyway, we're all glad you got back safely. And how would you rate your success in D.C. on a Likert scale?
We've got two more co-sponsors. Jamie Raskins of Maryland and Tom Malinowski of New Jersey have signed on, so that's 14. And I expect we will see more in the coming weeks. So I would describe this as a rousing success. And onward to bigger and better things. And honest to God, the look on that guy's face said everything. And if I could add something entirely superfluous and superficial to the process, I came home with more yuzu sauce.
Oh, where did you go to that particular place?
It was the same one I'd been to last summer in Arlington.
Okay.
And so I can now sip freely through the course of any given program.
Man, I know you got some sourdough bread too, right?
I got the sourdough. In fact, I had a grilled hot pepper cheese sourdough with only the most modest smear of mayonnaise to keep it all glued together. Just for supper a little bit ago.
That is beautiful. Guys, did you try their, they have a very good store brand of Dijon mustard.
No, I was laser beam focused on my yuzu and my sourdough, and I also picked up a bottle of their dragon sauce. The dragon hot sauce.
The curry, is that for the curry?
No, this is just it looks like swamp water, green and yeah. So. And that's the other thing. It is not going to. I don't think it's going to happen this weekend because we're looking at thunderstorms. But I'm going to lay in 2 or 3 bottles of. Well, no, I don't have to. I can refill a bottle and I can use that on. But we're getting very close to chicken fall curry, and I'm
right.
Because I got to cook it outside and it's going to be hot.
Oh God! Listen. You have to get, next time you go to that store, the red curry sauce, it's worth getting. People will think you're a genius.
Well, I'm beginning to wonder because, after all, Aldi owns Trader Joe's. I wonder if I can find some differently labeled stuff at Aldi because we got an Aldi in Beckley finally.
I think you might. Aldi's has good cereal, too. I like Aldi. Yeah. I'm telling you, get the jasmine rice. I made this weird company, and my people ate like, man, I thought these people were homeless. But seriously, and then so one person was a vegetarian, so I used tofu, and I have to say that all these years, and the secret to making tofu, one of them really, is to squeeze the hell out of it, get it as dry as you can get.
Yep.
Before you dry rub it or marinate it.
Press it.
And it's why I say I used to think linen and cloth napkins were kind of corny until I got older. But when you're having a nice dinner, it's nice to have some napkins, and when they get dirty, you can repurpose them for different things. So you can strain the tofu or whatever.
And the vegetarians in the Horn Family Community Congregation will be pleased to know that lunch one day in the Longworth cafeteria was a bowl of grilled tofu. Ramen.
That sounds delicious.
It was.
That sounds delicious and traditional.
And I squeezed a couple of wedges of lime into it, threw in some hot sauce, so a little bit of hoisin. Boom.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And took it back to my little table there and just picked it up and slurped away and then got my chopsticks and went after the ramen noodles. Nothing to complain about.
Something, I'm glad you were able to get some more of your yuzu sauce because there is something to that. It breaks that hot sauce with the vinegar. It breaks the fat down in your body. It really does. There's something to that. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that most likely it's probably helping your spleen. Break down the fat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It absolutely does. So I'm psyched. I'm psyched.
I'm psyched that you got a supply. That's what I'm talking about. So.
And I've never had 4 bottles of yuzu at one time. I may be.
Oh my God!
I may be absolutely profligate about the stuff.
I think you should give yourself a bell for that.
Okay. And
oh.
I think I'm gonna get one of the quart containers of the ain't got nothing in it but ice cream Haagen-Dazs vanilla, and I'm gonna try me some yuzu on that.
Oh man, kill it!
Why would it not be good?
Look, right? Exactly. It matches. Like green tea ice cream. Sounds crazy at first. But
you got all that citrus. You got a little bit of tart, a little tang, a little fire, and that sweet, creamy wonderfulness. How is that not going to be fantastic?
Well, let me. You know what? Just like with the stuffed pork loin. Now I made that too. And these people were people went crazy. Like, come on, don't you cook? You know, what do you people do?
Did you tie your butcher's knots? I got to know, did you tie butcher's knots?
I didn't, man. I did not. Wait, did I? No, I didn't. I used the toothpicks again. I do have a roll. I'm always finding things in this house. But
there's one really good video on YouTube of how to tie a butcher's knot, and a whole bunch of others that aren't.
What? Okay, I know. How does the butcher's knot differ from how you tie your shoe?
Oh, it's completely different. Because once you tie it, you can pull it down and snug it against the roast, and then it's this process of loop and swoop and under, and then you loop and swoop and under and loop and swoop and under until you get to the end, and then you tie another butcher's knot. Actually, you get to the end, then you flip it under and you loop and swoop and all the way back, and then you tie another butcher's knot. And it's perfectly held together.
So you get a nice tight roll.
Yeah. And that means everything cooks evenly, holds together, you don't lose a bunch of juices or flavor. Fantastic.
Right. Yeah.
And one of them got consumed, but I made it all the way home with a brick of the or a hunk of the aged Havarti.
Oh. Did you worship at the wall of cheese, man?
Oh, I did. I worshipped at the wall o' cheese. If they'd had banana cream Greek yogurt, the trip would have been complete.
Have you made the dough yet lately with the yogurt and just a good flour? They had the best. Honest to God, they had the best flour. That flour is better than King Arthur. Just a regular, unbelievable. And that means something, because if you know what flour, King Arthur is up there. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, you can break yourself buying King Arthur.
Well, and it's half the price, and it's better. Honest to God, yeah. But just flour and white Greek yogurt, you know, so you get to a dough ball. You can make your own pita bread with that. You can make pizza dough. It's one. I mean, it just saves time. Like, you know, sometimes you know, when you know how to make pizza dough the other way, you know, the traditional way, it takes time. You have to learn how to do it that way, but. This is easy. Anybody can do it. You can do this with kids.
You make. I'm gonna on the Acorn sourdough.
Oh yeah,
sourdough pizza dough.
That's what I'm talking about. Oh, get it real hot, real fast. Oh man.
Yeah. Get that edge blister going. Yeah. Got to get out of here, Todd. It's been a blast, man.
I'll see you soon.
All right, later. That's our buddy Todd calling from South Carolina, Stan, where I'm sure things is warming up a bit. Last word via James in Illinois. Subject line, clinging to power. Yes, we are in a constitutional crisis, but the system is designed for the peaceful transfer of power. The Secret Service is charged with protecting the president as well as the former presidents. At noon on January 20th, there will be a swearing in if the Don loses. Regardless whether he wishes to leave, he will transfer to protection as a former president. He will leave the White House either freely or with assistance. And that's hopeful. And we need some hopeful. Meanwhile, Lee in New York, in regard to the yuzu, says, your favorite sauce, get a 5-gallon jug, put a line at the top that says, this bottle must be this full for me to share this sauce. No, the sharing is the joy. The sharing is the joy. So we got $50 to go to finish Randy's challenge. I know for a fact Randy would like to see it done by airtime tomorrow. He said, I'm only holding open the challenge till close of program tomorrow. Let's get it done so that we're just dealing with 290 tomorrow for our first Friday on the front porch back after the epic D.C. trip. Okay? Thank you, one and all. Thanks to all of you who keep the program going. Thanks to all of you who share your precious finite time engaging in the discussion. Thank you. To our all-volunteer staff, thanks to Sparky in the chat room this evening. Thank you to our news ninjas. Thank you, Brother Deacon Asa, headon.live. Thank you, John Fox in Australia. Thank you, Ben Birch, whiterosesociety.org. Thanks to the hardest-working, bravest people I know, the men and women of Coal River Mountain Watch, crmw.net. 20 years leading the struggle from inside Appalachia, inside the mountaintop removal sacrifice zone for environmental justice and human rights at the point of the spear. And always, 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 Gina, it's all for you. Later, y'all.